In this tech talk, we're going to compare ShoreTel and Cisco as it relates to the capabilities of dial plans, translation patterns, class of service, which is calling privileges, and how each of these systems achieves the desired result. So first we're going to log into the ShoreTel system and take a look at dial plans. Then we'll take a look at each of the other components. Once you get into the ShoreTel port administration portal, the first place, especially when you're setting up the system, you're going to go here to dial plans under system parameters. Now, at the initial configuration of the ShoreTel system, you're required to determine how many extension digits are required in your deployment. Now, out of the box, it comes with 3. Now you can increase this, which will warn you that this is a one-way trip. You can go there one time, and you can increase the number of digits to 4 or 5 digits, and then you would append a digit in front of them. So if you had 3 digits that started with 100, you could increase it to 100, and then you'd be asked to put a digit in front of that, another 1, or some other digit. It's a one-way trip though. And secondly, it is defining the number of digits in the ShoreTel deployment for the entire cluster. A cluster is a Cisco word, but it's appropriate here too. For ShoreTel system, a single headquarters server might be deployed over multiple sites with other distributed servers, but at the end of the day, it's a single system, and so we need to pay attention to that because we're talking about a common configuration database, one database that drives the system. And in the case of ShoreTel, everybody connected to the system would be required to have 3-digit extension numbers, or 4 or 5 if you increase them. The second thing you're going to do is then decide how the digits are to be used. In this system, we've laid it out so that digits starting with 4 and 5 are used for extensions, and the digit 0 gets you to the operator. In some situations, you might use that as a single-digit access code to get to the outside world. And here we're using 9 for a single-digit access code to the outside world. So that's the basic dial plan for ShoreTel. That's your configuration options. So what to do if you have some sites that have, let's say, 4 digits? Well, you're going to have to deploy your ShoreTel system for the 4 digits. You can't have one ShoreTel site be 3 digits, another be 4 digits. That's not going to work. The only way you can do that, of course, is to install a second cluster or a second ShoreTel system, if you will. So you'd have 2 separate ShoreTel systems, and then you could tie them together using a SIP tie trunk, for example. And then you might use translation patterns to tell your trunk group about a different dialing plan at the remote location. So you could go into a trunk, set it up, and then set up some translation tables. Translation tables are useful. Let's go here and set up a translation table. And you can see what we can do here is to add some originating digits and then what we're going to replace them for. So that would be a strategy for having different digits at different sites, but of course it's going out over a trunk, and therefore you're suggesting it's a separate system. Let's take a look at user groups and classes of service. Now, it's very difficult to discuss these as separate entities in ShoreTel. So you have user groups, and basically You might think of this as I'm going to throw my managers in one group and my staff in another group and my executives in yet a different group, and I'll have house phones. They're just classifications. In the Microsoft world, they would be containers, okay? So here, uh, the particular classes of service have to do with this going across the top. So my telephony features, what features do I have available to me if I am in the group called executives? And this is principally how you would go about setting different permissions. I may want house phones to be able to make local calls and executives to be able to dial internationally. So that's basically how you would configure it in ShoreTel. You'd set up user groups, you'd have classes of service that are broken into telephony features, calling permissions, and the size of your voicemail system. Then you would individually configure those, for example, fully featured people in the executive group might have permission to record their own phone calls or to initiate an intercom or whisper page, whereas someone in another class of service might not have that. So very simple to configure, very flexible, and it covers most of the general business communications requirements for user groups and classes of service and permissions for different calling privileges. Let's take a look at how you might do this in Cisco. In the case of Cisco, there are three concepts that we're going to look at to achieve the same characteristics we just discussed in ShoreTel. So those characteristics are the concept of route patterns. Route patterns determine how digits dialed will be routed. We also have the concept of partitions and calling search spaces. This matches user groups and classes of service in ShoreTel. Now, Cisco is significantly more complex to configure, but with complexity comes a great deal of granularity that enables us to do some interesting things. For example, the concept of a route pattern. A route pattern, we'll take a look at a route pattern. What we're doing is defining exactly how a call should be routed based on the digits received by the call manager, whether they were dialed by a handset or whether they were dialed inbound from the voice gateway from the public switch telephone network, for example. So you will actually go in here and define the actual digit. So here I'm saying if I see 1 and a digit between 2 and 9, followed by any digit 1 through 0, followed by a digit between. So basically, if I see someone trying to dial a long distance call, then what that does is tell me the devices that I should use to complete that call. And this is where you can get very granular with the Cisco dial plan. So I can actually take a single number out of a range of numbers and have it handled differently. Whereas in ShoreTel, I'm saying if someone dials 9 plus the area code, send it here. Here I'm able to say if someone dials 1-858-945-0010, send that to a place that might be different from 1-858-945-0020. I can actually specify a different outbound device. And typically a route plan, a dial digit will point to a route list which contains a list of devices. So I might have a gateway for this that goes directly to the PSTN, and I might have another gateway that goes to a WAN connection to another site, and it will enable me to manipulate those digits as I cross those various boundaries. So our route plans will typically talk to a route list, and the route list will contain a group, and that group will contain devices. And so using the route pattern concept, we can create very, very granular directions as to how a call should be handled. It also enables us to have a situation in which I have 3-digit dialing at one at one site, and 4-digit dialing at another site. It enables me to set up these are, numbers that someone in the outside world would not typically dial. I like to make use of the 300, 999, 1000 range for all of my system extensions, because 300 is not a real area code. No one's going to actually dial that. And this enables you to create some very, very specific ways of handling a phone call. These digits go to this route list. This route list contains this group of devices. This group of devices will further manipulate digits such that if I send the call out this gateway through the PSTN, I want to send 10 digits, and I want the caller ID to look like this. Maybe I could complete that call through another gateway in which I arrive as a local call in that target area code, in which case I only want to generate 7 digits. And so, or I landed a gateway that goes across the WAN connection, and I only need 4 digits, or whatever the number of digits is at that site. So the concept of a route pattern is a very, very powerful, and it also works with translation patterns. So I can take 10 digits and translate them down to 4 digits. I can take 4 digits and translate them some other way. And at this point, we try to standardize on E164 dialing, and therefore the +1 concept. The concept of calling search spaces, I think it's easier to explain partitions if we start with calling search space. A partition, some people like the locks and keys metaphor. I like it. It's a little easier to say. A partition defines who can call me. So if my device, whether my device is a phone or a site or even an extension number, or a long distance number, a local number, that would go into a partition. And for someone to be able to access that partition, they have to have a calling search space that encompasses that partition. So it's a little easier if we look at a calling search space. So we have this calling search space here called base CSS. And what you can see is if you have this calling search space or this class of service or this permission, you can contact any of the partitions that are listed here. So we can conclude from this that if you've got base CSS, you're basically a house phone, and you can conference park and call other extensions in the base partition, but you can't make long distance calls. If I were to look at a different calling search space, let's say if I have this search space, then I can see all of these partitions. And again, it enables you to very specifically identify what devices, lines, resources a particular class of servers the calling search space might have access to. So again, a different approach between the two solutions. I think in very, very large deployments where you're going to have very complex dial plans in which you might have multiple sites with different extension numbers, that you will find that you've got greater granularity with this approach. At any rate, that's the difference between ShoreTel and Cisco in the area of dial plans and calling privileges. I hope you have found this informative, and I thank you for viewing.